I am Tamar Ish Shalom, and this is Jewish Crossroads. Times of crisis bring enormous challenges, but they also tend to produce new leaders, people who feel that this moment is asking something of them and choose to answer that call. Over the past 2 years, we've seen the emergence of quite a few American Jewish voices like that, and today I'm joined by one of the most compelling among them, Jonah Platt. Jonah was well known long before October 7th as a producer, a writer, and cultural voice. He is the son of legendary Hollywood producer Marc Platt and of Julie Platt, one of the most senior leaders in organized American Jewish life. Over the past 2 years, he's undergone a very visible transformation. Through his podcast, Being Jewish, Jonah has become a distinctly unapologetic Jewish voice, proud, joyful, curious, and deeply engaged. He's created a space that refuses shame, embraces complexity, and insists that Jewish identity can be confident, open, and alive. The podcast has reached wide audiences and earned industry recognition, but maybe even more important, it resonated with people who were looking for a language that feels honest, human, and grounded in this moment. Jonah, I'm really glad to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. What a lovely intro. I'm honored.
So let's dive right in. How do you see and how do you understand this moment we're in right now, the beginning of 2026 in American Jewish life?
Well, there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. I would look at it as an opportunity. I feel that we are at the beginning of a movement in American Jewry, and the past 2 years have been a real reckoning of, what we've been doing wrong. We've been asleep at the wheel on a lot of different things. And what's come out of this moment is a lot of engaged people like myself who were engaged before, but not to this level. The urgency is what's changed. And I think we're going to start seeing, a real shift in what the diaspora looks like and what Jewish identity means over the next 25 years. And I think it's going to, be felt in every level of Jewish life, on the ground, institutionally, education, kind of everywhere. People are awake, people are working, and I hope to see really monumental changes and be a part of them.
No, that when we talk about October 8 Jews, we're talking about that moment in history of urgency, of people mobilizing, coming together with a lot of energy and this eagerness for community. Do you feel that we're now entering maybe a more fragile phase of possibly fatigue or exhaustion? I mean, these have been very difficult 2 years.
Yes, I think even more so than fatigue or exhaustion, I think there's what I would call, sort of a let up, taking your foot off the gas. I think there is a little potential for some of that from some folks, just because the war is technically over, the hostages are home. It's like that chapter for some people is like, like crisis averted. Now I can sort of go a little bit back to normal life. But I think that's the minority of the people who, really have jumped up, to use your term, the October 8th Jews. I don't think those folks are going anywhere because they understand how enormous this moment is and sort of what has been revealed of Jewish standing in the world and the fragmentation of the Jewish community and the lack of proper Israel and Jewish identity education. Like, there's all these cracks that have popped up. And I think for the most part, you're seeing people really understand the seriousness of those cracks. And across industries, people are hard at work to repair them.
There's a lot of engagement and work, and also there's a very clear generational crisis. I mean, many young Jews feel less connected to Jewish institution, and Jewish organizations and communities are all trying to figure out how to reach Gen Z, right? That's like the big question, and that's why spaces like the podcast that you created feel so important, because you reach young people without preaching, with conversation full of joy and lightness, and, at the same time, depth depth and honesty. What are the most interesting responses you've received from young Jews?
Huh. Interesting. I mean, I guess I'm find it interesting anytime there's a young person listening to or engaging with a podcast. I mean, they didn't exist when I was in high school or in college. So the fact that someone of that age is taking the time to, enrich themselves with anything is impressive to me. I'd say what I love hearing from young folks who have discussions intergenerationally because of the show. Like, oh, I watched this with my dad and my older sibling, and like we all talk about it. That's really terrific. It's great. I got invited to a BBYO event
Hmm.
by the leaders of the region who were fans of the show and wanted to, interview me in front of their peers. And I just love that I'm reaching other Jewish leaders, in this case, younger Jewish leaders, who they inspire me. So it's a nice feedback loop there. So it's fantastic, and it's definitely not all of my audience. In fact, most of my audience actually skews a bit older, but I am reaching younger folks, which is important. But as you say, that's what everybody's kind of focused on.
What do you think that Jewish organizations are getting wrong, or at least not doing well enough when it comes to engaging young people?
There's sort of two ways to answer that question. I think equally important as the institutions who are trying and have been trying is the parents, really. We in America certainly have taken Jewish identity for granted largely, and which is why it's slipping away from so many people because there's a lack of intentionality in the home of parents who go, I know why this is important to me. My kids will just get it even if I'm not really modeling that for them or talking to them about it or ensuring that they're engaged in some way. And the biggest drop off is at this critical time post bar mitzvah, pre full adulthood, where if you're not in a Jewish high school or a more religious family, if you're one of the majority of American Jews who is not religious and is not in a Jewish school, you have no official programming or pipeline. So if your parents aren't finding something to put you in, it doesn't matter if the institutions offer 100 programs. If your parents aren't saying you're going to go get involved with Club Z or whatever it is, or you're going to, there's a Jewish club at your high school, you should take a leadership role. If they're not doing that, they're not giving you the opportunity to be an engaged and connected Jewish person. So the more so even than institutions, families need to decide this is important. I actually just had this conversation with somebody over the weekend where I was talking about this, and his son is in seventh grade. He was like, "Well, he's not in any programs." I was like,
Hmm.
"We got to talk about this. Like, we got to find something for him to get into so he doesn't lose this." On the institutional side, I am seeing stuff, but it's mostly things like I mentioned, Club Z. There's another organization called AKLA. It's stuff that's sort of happening outside of the more established Jewish organizational world. Those things just tend to move a little bit slower and are good at supporting the more nimble new groups. But what you're seeing is there's a big focus on Jewish pride and really trying to instill that in young people. It's not just about education, although that's critical. And we need to be having really open, deep, rich identity education, Jewish history education, Israel education, none of which I got really growing up. Not even that it was one sided. I got like zero sided, just very shallow knowledge. I don't know why, but that just wasn't a priority. That's becoming a priority. And just like letting young Jews find community, find each other, and celebrate being Jewish together and how awesome that is. Like AKLA, I mentioned, is a really cool program. They take high schoolers to, for example, Cedar Sinai Medical Hospital in LA to show them, hey, when Jews weren't allowed to work in other hospitals, they formed their own. And now it's one of them, it's the main hospital system in LA and has achieved all these great things. Like, look how great Jews are, what innovators, what founders of and creatives. They take you to Warner Brothers, teach you about the history of Hollywood. Like, look what we built. How awesome are we? And that's the switch that really needs to flip, is how awesome are we? We need to go from, don't notice me, you might say something bad about me, to we're awesome, we're not going anywhere, we contribute so much to society, you should want to be friends with us because we want to be friends with you.
I wanted to talk a bit more about Jewish pride with young adults. Do you think that some young Jews internalize an unspoken message from their social environment? It's not stated explicitly, right? But it's like conveyed through nuance that if they want to truly belong in progressive spaces, they need to leave their proud Jewish identity at the door.
Yeah, I mean, and I would argue it's not so subtle. I mean, especially now as we're starting to get into the American political cycle, you're starting to see some parts of the progressive wing literally make it a litmus test of, you cannot be our candidate if you don't call what's happening in Gaza a genocide, like flat out. So the people are feeling the pressure, and the anti-Jew bigotry hard. And I think, though, as you rightly point out, many people are all too willing to check that connection at the door, so that they can be accepted by their peer group, who to them, and this is where it speaks to what I just said earlier, a lot of these young people, they've already reached the point where their progressive circle is more important to them than their Jewish circle.
Mhm.
We've already sort of lost them in terms of Jewish engagement. Like, they don't do, I talked about this on my podcast once. I compared it to the song Pink Pony Club by Chapel Roan, which tells the story of a girl who loves her home, loves her mama back home in the South, but like the Pink Pony Club, where everybody can be queen for a day, like that's where she belongs. And to me, that sort of describes a lot of young American Jews is, oh, I love being Jewish because it makes me think of my family, and like we celebrate some holidays, and I went to day school, but like that's my home, like upbringing, like that's a different world than what I live in now. And like who my people are and where I really belong is this progressive sphere. And it's much more important to me to say and do what's in line with these people than it is like my parents' people or my
Yeah.
my, my family friends from growing up.
And I guess that sometimes it feels like the message is you can stay Jewish in progressive areas, but only a very certain kind of Jew, an apologetic Jew, maybe we can call it
Yes,
that way, one who
that
distances himself from his community, from Israel, of course. And then is that even Jewish if you're not part of the mishpucha and part of a community?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's tricky about it is okay to be Jewish in these spheres. You just can't. You certainly have to disavow Israel, and that has to be like the first line of your identity. Like, nothing else matters until that part is cleared, and then you can, yeah, sure, we can have Shabbat, like, great. But again, it's like you're not finding there are exceptions. Like, I know of even Orthodox anti-Zionist young people in America, which is blows my mind, but they exist too. But for the most part, it's like I said, people who are already like the only Jewish thing they do is stuff with their family, or maybe like an occasional Shabbat kind of a thing. Like, these are not people who are volunteering in their community, or they're surrounded by people who are otherwise also super engaged. They're all sort of not engaged together.
Yeah, and then maybe another angle regarding this, Jewish pride is that maybe some young Jews genuinely adopt very binary moral frameworks like victim versus oppressor, absolute good versus absolute evil. And within that very extreme progressive framework, they see themselves as privileged white Jews, like born with like this built-in guilt. And then, of course, they're not proud Jews because in that framework, you can only be ashamed, not
That's
not proud.
You're 100% correct. I think that's one of the key issues. I mean, one, that's where the education piece is so important, this Jewish identityhood piece that I've mentioned a few times, because people, literally Jews themselves, are growing up thinking of themselves as like random white people who got born into a religion, as opposed to like members of this social group called a tribe that share all these different things that have been stretching on for thousands of years, of which religion is a piece, but not the whole piece. And to flatten Jews into just being white people is to misunderstand who Jews are entirely. And it's one thing for the non-Jewish world to not understand who and what we are, but for our own community to not understand who and what we are is a failure of the community. I mean, that's an educational failure. And I think you're 100% right that white guilt is at the core of a lot of this, where it's like, well, I can't take out my white colonial imperialist privilege guilt on my own. Like, I'm not going to move out of my house and give it over to some Native Americans. Like, I'm not doing that. But I can get really mad at Israel, completely misunderstand what's going on over there, and take it out on them and say they should move out of their houses or whatever it is. You
By
know?
the way, if they would just come and visit, they would see in Israel, what's obvious is that Jews come in many colors and ethnicities and backgrounds. We're not only
Of
white.
course. I think even some folks who understand that intellectually, it doesn't really make a dent. I mean, that's another problem with this sort of group. It is a kind of brainwashing. So even certain facts or experiences, like, they've already chosen a narrative. It's very hard to undo. So I agree with you. There are certain people who, like, literally don't even know that, like, a black Jew is a thing. And so you take them to Israel and they're like, I didn't know these human beings existed. I don't think that's always the case for American Jews who have become anti-Zionist. But I do think it has to be a little bit even more than that for them, especially because a lot of them have been to Israel, right? They went on a US-wide trip or a birthright or whatever, and maybe they came away with it, you know, they didn't show me the real truth. A lot of people with that, or again, it's like, that's in the past. That's part of the me I grew up with, and like, yeah, Israel's great, but like, it's not important. It's not that important to me. I can feel totally Jewish without being connected there, and that's totally fine. Which is fine for them if they want to define their Jewishness that way. But what bothers me is when they sort of then try to define Jewishness generally that way, which is just flat out incorrect. So
Yeah.
there has to be an acknowledgement, and there isn't, of I am choosing to do this totally differently than the way that it's meant to be done, and not the sort of entitled of like, well, it is what I say it is, which it just isn't.
I want to jump to another topic, Iran. Were you surprised by the silence of many spaces that were so vocal over the past 2 years during the war in Gaza when it came to the huge massacre in Iran?
Of course not. I mean, at this point, like, these people have shown their true colors. There have been massacres and genocides and wars and famine of all stripes over the past 2 years and before, and there will be more. And those people are not going to say anything about any of them because it's not what they're actually about. To get into look. It's the fix is in, right? So I mean, I just talked about this on the pod. Like, the New York Times wrote about the Israel-Gaza war, like 5,500 articles in the first 9 months. And like, when America was fighting ISIS in Mosul, they wrote 80 in the first 9 months. So like, very much this is the thing you're supposed to care about. And you're supposed to care about it because it's being heavily influenced by Israel's enemies, by enemies of the Jews, by people with agendas who want this to be the focus, who want a specific narrative put out there, who are looking to demonize the one Jewish state and the people that state represents. And that's why so many people are involved, whether they know it or not. I don't think a lot of these people just are sheeping their way into this. Again, it's that brainwashing of, oh, this is what the progressives are doing. Okay, this is what we're doing. And so they're jumping on the bandwagon. But these are not like deeply held like commitments to human rights and justice. I bet half these people don't even know what was happening in Iran because they're not paying attention to it, because their feed's not telling them it's important. Their friends aren't saying this is important. Their progressive leaders or celebrities or whoever they follow aren't saying this is important. And they don't think for themselves about this stuff. And in some ways, that's okay, because not everybody is supposed to pay attention to everything happening all over the world all the time. If you're, a random college kid who's majoring in math, like, I don't expect you to know what's going on in Iran at all times. But the problem becomes when you have that mentality towards life, but then there's this one thing that you jump into and you uncritically do so without going, like, why is this one thing the thing everybody's talking about and they're making seem so important, and nothing else really seems that important? There's no critical thinking going on. So the whole thing is like a closed loop of, we don't think critically about stuff, so we'll talk about what you tell us to, and we won't think about anything else.
I mean, the hypocrisy obviously was astonishing, but there was one response that I found interesting, worth engaging with. I don't remember who tweeted it, unfortunately, but the argument was this. During the war in Gaza, people protested because they wanted to pressure the American administration to stop something. They wanted to stop support Israel militarily, diplomatically, publicly, and there was a practical goal to our protests, okay? It was like this pro-Palestinian tweet. In the case of Iran, they wrote, the U.S. does not support the Iranian regime anyway. So it's quite the opposite. So there's no reason to protest. That's why we're not there. How would you respond to that argument?
I mean, even just the way you laid it out, it seems so clear, right? In one, it's, hey, America, we don't want you to do X, Y, Z. And in this case, it should have been, hey, America, we want you to do X, Y, Z. It should be, the Iranian people are getting slaughtered. They need our support. America, go help these people. Go be the world's watchdog, the policeman. Like, the world is a safer place when America is involved and holding nefarious powers to account. And I mean, certainly that's what the pro-Iranian voices are saying. Are like, please, America, like, they are dying. We need you to be there. So I think that's a total cop-out to be like, well, there was no messaging there. There totally was. You just weren't listening to it.
Yeah. And they talk a lot about solidarity, even if it wouldn't help with anything. Just think about the solidarity that Iranians would feel if the streets of Manhattan were, full of protesters for them.
Of course. And again, it's tough because, actually, my next week's episode, I just had 3 Iranian Jewish voices on, and we have a really interesting conversation. And in doing my research, I realized the Iranian community is very small outside of Iran. It's huge in Iran, but it is a very, very small group. So, like, most people in America have never met an Iranian. It's not something they're thinking about. So I understand perhaps why the streets across America aren't flooded. It's just not something people are connected to personally or on the news. Certainly the media. I mean, to me, the biggest story was the way the legacy media was not covering what was happening there. That, to me, is a really crazy thing that we should be looking at. That, like, if you wanted true on-the-ground breaking news, it was only on social media. You could not rely on established media to be giving you the story there. That, to me, is the story of how obsolete legacy media is becoming and how firmly entrenched these agendas are within the media, that you're not covering this in a huge, impactful story that has ramifications for the entire world order. It's not like, oh, this is just a terrible atrocity happening in some random country. It's like, if Iran is the linchpin for so much of what goes on in this world, so much of the horrible, negative, murderous things that go on in this world, and that you're not going to cover when there's, an uprising there, that speaks volumes to me about where we are and how sort of dangerous the media landscape is today.
Yeah, it's very telling. I want to touch on another topic. I think that part of what makes this moment so challenging in the U.S. is the sense of being caught in a vice of anti-Semitism coming from both the left and the right. It can feel suffocating, obviously very worrying. What insights do you have and thoughts about, similarities and differences between anti-Semitism on the far right and anti-Semitism on the far left, and this moment we are in, which is quite frightening?
Yeah, so I would name what we're seeing on the left as anti-Zionism, as a distinct form of Jew hate, as opposed to anti-Semitism, which they're very similar and function similarly, but they are their own sort of animals. And it's interesting because they function the same way but opposites. So, like, on the right, anti-Semitism we view as like a low class kind of hate, but anti-Zionism is this sort of intellectual high class kind of hate. The anti-Zionists are saying Jews are Nazis. The anti-Semites say we like the Nazis. The anti-Semites say, go back to Poland, and they say, get the anti-Semites say, get out of our country. And the anti-Zionists say, like, why aren't you integrated into the country? It's all the same thing. What I take comfort in is it's not the majority. It really isn't. The majority of us are in the middle and are getting squeezed by these two sides, as you say, but there's more of us than there are of them. And unfortunately, it's that, that silent majority. The middle is not as loud as these other two. So it feels like these other two are controlling everything. But if you look at the actual like voting records in the US government, like the majority on both the right and the left are not these extremes. It's very much still on the fringes. This is the moment, though, that we need to contain them and keep them on the fringes and stop the normalization and the mainstreaming of a lot of these ideas. And the most important way to do that is to call out the anti-Zionism, that hate from the left. That's the most insidious kind. We've not been taught how to recognize that as a society, even though the Soviets did it really well in the 20th century. Like, we have a great example. They literally used anti-Zionism to other and repress their Jewish community. But we all got raised on the Holocaust education. So we all know what Nazis look like. We all know what like very blatant racism against Jews looks like. We don't know how to recognize it from the left. So that's a really key piece. We need to educate on that. And then we all have to be calling it out all the time and not letting people get away with, if a Jew posts something on it just happened yesterday. Elizabeth Banks, the American movie star and producer, posts a beautiful video about a bat mitzvah that she was at and what she loved about the ceremony. Half the comments are, "This is beautiful," and half are "Free Palestine." And like commenting "Free Palestine" on a Jewish person's post about a bar mitzvah is racism. And like, we can't just keep letting people do this stuff and act like that's okay or normal or righteous or like, good job, dude. It has to be, that is so hateful and so racist and bigoted. I mean, those are the words for it. So really calling that stuff out is critical. And the people in the middle knowing it looks and sounds scary, but like, so many people are in this boat with me. I'm definitely not alone. Most people feel the way I feel. I can't tell you how many conversations I have. Jews in America are generally liberal. I mean, by overwhelmingly liberal, have overwhelmingly be Democrat. And the majority of them are having these conversations of like, what do I do? Who do I vote for? Like, where am I? What's happening?
What's left?
What's left? I mean, it's like, it's really coming down to, certainly for me and for a lot of people, it's a person by person situation. Like, each race has to be examined on its own merits. We cannot just be, I'm with those guys or I'm with those guys. It's too dicey. So I do take comfort, and I know others should, that so many of us are in that boat, and like, that is the moment we're in, and we're going to have to deal with it.
I don't know if it gives you comfort, but many Israelis on the right and the left right now in Israel have the same, question. They're asking themselves who to vote after everything we've gone through. However, there is, and you mentioned social media, there is a real attempt to mainstream anti-Semitism, most of it through social media on the right and on the left. And I think that if we had this conversation, let's say in 2019, I think neither of us would have believed that this kind of future is possible. Were we naive?
It's a great question. I'll say yes and no. I mean, in a way, like, human beings are naive generally, right? Like, we never expect the horrible things that happen, and someone always breaks the rules, right? Somebody always goes outside the bounds. It's like when you're kids and you're playing, it's like, it's going to be okay as long as we all follow the rules. And then as soon as somebody breaks it, it ruins it for everybody. So in a way, I think Donald Trump was that rule breaker, at least in America, for a lot of ways, that he normalized a way of speaking to each other and thinking about each other and behaving towards one another that really you'll be able to track back, like, a beginning, an epicenter of a lot of the fissures that we're seeing, because it just wasn't done before him. Like, people maintain the rules of polite discourse and of disagreement and of unity, and he just sort of threw it all out the window. Was like, no, it's cool to hate each other, it's cool to disparage each other, it's cool to pit us against each other, and everything has sort of snowballed, I think, from there. So could we have predicted that one day a demagogue like that would come along and do such a thing? Sure. But impossible to really predict, I think. And and we definitely were caught sleeping at the wheel in terms of Jewish communal life here. I mean, that we were not paying good enough attention to. We should have been seeing the signs earlier of the lack of, again, like Israel education and identity education and overall engagement. Like those are the big things where it's like, wow, we got lazy. Like we got kind of cocky here, and we thought everything was just going to work out without that intentionality of ensuring and remembering, like, yes, we're so assimilated and so integrated, and that's a beautiful thing, but we're going to lose this Jewish identity if we're not being really intentional about how we preserve it. And it's never too late to make up for lost time, but we're certainly playing catch up.
Let's talk a bit about Hollywood. You and your whole family are deeply embedded in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry. How surprised and how disappointed were you by two separate things? Obviously, they connect, but they are different. The lack of public support for Israel after October 7th, and what seems as silence by many around the rise of anti-Semitism.
I mean, to answer the second question first, like, of course, supremely disappointed. I mean, anybody, whether you're connected to the industry or not, would have to be disappointed about how horrible Hollywood has shown itself to be, sort of as a at least public facing industry wide, and at least from the celebrity class. I will say behind the scenes, I've been gladdened to see a lot of sort of woken up October 8 Jews who were engaged Jews before October 7th and now feel that urgency. And they're like, oh, I need to really be now an advocate and an ambassador for our people within the industry in a way that I wasn't doing before. So I do see that. So that makes me feel good. And I feel like we're on a good footing there. But in terms of the way Hollywood reacted, especially in the first moments after October 7th, anybody who said they weren't shocked would be lying. And I mean, this is already, I was already informed to the way that Jews don't count, and, the way that it was the anti-Zionism, it was the othering of Jews rising on the left. And I'm still surprised at how, in the first days, it's like, can you put your name on this letter about the hostages? Doesn't mention Israel, doesn't mention anything, just help set these kidnapped civilians free, and people wouldn't do it. And the understanding that the lack of understanding around Jews in Israel was so powerful that people wouldn't even touch. I mean, I hosted an event at my house, and it's what I called a mosaic Shabbat, and I was bringing people from all these different ethnicities and backgrounds and cultures, Jewish and non, and I was surprised to hear a number of people from certain communities be like, I can't, it's too dicey right now. And I'm like,
Wow,
it's
coming for a Shabbat at
to
your
come
house.
to a Shabbat, because it was going to be filmed. So to be seen on social media with Jews at a Jewish holiday event was dicey for people, which is,
Yeah.
that's upsetting.
What
I was
both
pissed.
Yeah. What bothers you more? Or I will use your language. What pisses you more? I mean, non-Jews who don't stand along their Jewish colleagues and Jewish community, or prominent Jewish figures in the industry who keep silent?
Oh, do I have to pick one? I mean, they're both terrible. Here's the thing with the Jews in Hollywood that people have to understand. There's sort of two parts. One is the majority of Jews in Hollywood are already disengaged Jews. Because again, it's a microcosm of America, right? Most American Jews, sadly today, like overall, we have more engaged than not, but like the biggest single chunk, like I think it's something 40% are like unaffiliated Jews. And so if you look within Hollywood, that's probably even higher. So to expect those Jews to say anything now is expecting too much. They were never going to say anything anyway. They don't even care. It's the ones that do care and are engaged and are still afraid and are still putting career and business first. That's infuriating to me. I mean, I look, it's your life. You have to live it the way that you want to live it. But I don't know how those people are going to bed feeling good about themselves. It's hard. I go to bed feeling good because I know I'm doing everything I can, and it is what it is, and I'm not going to fix everything or even anything, but I'm trying. And to go to bed knowing like, oh, I'm an agent and I represent someone who's a horrible Jew hater, but like they're good for business, so I'm not going to talk to them and I don't want to rock the boat and my job's too important. I understand that like livelihood and supporting your family, like these things are critical. I just think, and I've seen that like you just have to walk, you have to cross the line. You have to go, you know what? My integrity is more important. I'm going to go through, and you're going to find beautiful opportunities on the other side, and you'll find them as your full authentic self, who, you know, with dignity and self-respect, as opposed to this hiding Jew, I just want to get by mentality. And then the non-Jews not standing with their Jewish friends, again, you know, I'll give you the nuanced answer, which is number one, I think we are terrible as human beings, but certainly as Jews, of telling people how we want them to show up. So I think, first of all, you have to really give people a chance as well. You have to say, hey, friend of mine, you should have texted me on this day. I was feeling really down and it hurt me as a friend that you didn't. Or I'm having this event. It would really mean a lot for me for you to come and just be there with me. If they then fail, then they suck. But I think half the people that we think are silent and don't care want to care and are genuinely caring people. They just don't know how to do it. And they're like, well, I don't want to go on social media and post a picture of an Israeli flag and say, I love Bibi Netanyahu. But like, we don't want them to do that. But they don't know. They think that's what's being asked of them. So we have to do a better job of communicating allyship and giving these people a chance. But again, as I mentioned before, like with my dinner, there are a lot of people who suck and are just like, oh, it's too dicey for me to associate right now. And again, it's they're putting themselves and their careers ahead of doing what's right. And that I'll never be able to relate to that.
In that context, how significant was Paramount's response under its new CEO, David Ellison, the decision to push back publicly against the boycott letter, against, engaging with Israeli organizations? I think it was nearly 4,000 people who signed that petition.
So two things there. So number one, again, 4,000 sounds like a lot. It's a minuscule fraction of the industry. So I think that's another thing that's important for people to realize. The industry is millions of people. So this probably not even 1% of people on this letter. So that's one thing. But the other, to answer your question, huge. And again, it's not hard. Like nobody, Paramount didn't go out of business after they made that statement. It just takes the right people in the right positions to say, okay, enough. I'm going to say something here. It shouldn't feel brave to do the right thing. It's like the right thing to do. But let's say it is, like, be brave, do the thing, and you'll find that you're better off. No one regrets doing the right thing and like feeling proud of who they are and standing up to hate. Like, no one's like, man, I wish I hadn't stood up to hate. That didn't, it always feels good, and good things come from it. It was huge that Paramount did that. It's huge that they have the October 7th fictionalized miniseries on their platform. HBO has one as well, which I think is amazing. So again, there are people in positions of levers of power who are making the right choices. We just need more of them. We need them more consistently. We need them more public facing, for morale's sake, if nothing else, so that people know, like, it can't just be me saying, hey, trust me, I'm seeing it behind the scenes. Like, I wish it was more overt so people could really take it in. But, it's happening, and I think it will continue to happen. I think you will start to see more and more stuff like that. I hope.
Have you paid a personal price over the past 2 years for the, positions you've taken?
If I have, I'm not aware of it. So it also sort of, I'm a unique case in a couple of ways, which is that, one, the majority of my friend circle, like, I didn't lose really any friends over this. I know that's very unique for people in my position. I think it's because most of my like closest friends are from my Jewish elementary school and my Jewish summer camp, and just I've always worn my Jewishness on my sleeve. So it's like you didn't wake up and all of a sudden be like, oh, Jonah cares deeply about Jews in Israel. It's like we already knew that. And like the first texts I got on October 7th were from non-Jewish actor friends of mine who were checking in, which was really nice. So career-wise, I happen to be, I've sort of pivoted pretty hard away from entertainment towards advocacy and the podcasts and all that. So I'm not throwing my hat in the ring for opportunities the way I was pre-October 7th. So it's hard to say if I'd be getting, blacklisted or something. But what I will say, and I have seen this with everybody, is like new and different opportunities appear when you do this. Once you sort of, again, like cross this line, I think of it, to use a Harry Potter reference, it's like that platform 9 3/4 for people who
Hmm.
are familiar with the book. It looks like a brick wall, but as soon as you run through it, you go straight through, and on the other side is like the incredible magical wizarding world. So I think a lot of people see that brick wall and they're afraid to go through it. But actually, once you step through it, you're like, oh, you're here, and you're here, and you're here, and we all like find each other. And now all these new projects are coming together with people who are, on the other side of that wall. And so I would just continue to encourage people, wherever you are, entertainment or otherwise, like, go through that wall and you're going to find all your people waiting for you on the other side.
It's not the Kotel. It's not the Western Wall. You can go
No,
through it
that's right.
and stay alive. You know that in Israel, the judicial overhaul and the polarization that was intensified by the war have created deep rifts between
Yeah.
friends, within families. And I guess that in a way it mirrors somewhat what's happening within the Jewish community here since October 7th. What is your core advice, whether it's to families or social circles, trying to preserve, connection and love when there are deep ideological disagreements, that feel that they burn inside you?
I think the important part of your question is that you didn't frame it as, how do I convince this person that is important to me to see the right way, or how do I stay together. It's about, how do I preserve the relationship. And as long as that's the agenda, that's it, it's doable. If you care about this person enough, I always say, it's like, if you were only going to get together with this person to talk about their dissenting views on this topic, not somebody you need to be caring about. That doesn't speak to the level of importance in your life. But if it's someone you were going to get dinner with anyways, and now dinner's hard because you have this thing between you, get that dinner, approach it. I mean, I have a whole sort of system. I call it the 5 C's, which we don't have time to go into fully here. But the general idea is, you need to go in calmly, dispassionately, and from a place of the relationship and vulnerability, where it's not, your idea is wrong, you're dumb, you've been brainwashed. It's, you're my cousin, you're my best friend, whatever. Like, I love you. It hurts me when you do X as a friend. I'm not telling you need to change your mind, but like, when you do this, no, if you post that thing, it's hurting me. And like, I wish you would check in with me. Or when you take this point of view, what I'm hearing is XYZ. Like, is that true? Is that what you're meaning by it? Like, you have to be curious. You have to ask questions. You have to say, help me understand what you're doing, because I know you're not a monster. I know you're not a horrible person. So help me feel better about this. Even if we disagreed, like, let me know that you care about me, even as you're disagreeing with me. As long as we like focus that, we can preserve. And then when you get together with this person, maybe don't talk about it, the thing that's in between you. And that's okay. Like, for us in America, it's like, you're not going to solve the Middle East crisis, you and your college roommate, at this coffee meeting. So like, take it down a notch. Let's like enjoy being together. You can talk about it with your friends who agree with you, and I can talk about it with my friends who agree with you. Or maybe we get to a place where like, we can talk about these things openly without the stakes. Like, there's no stakes in them. I have that, my wife's family generally is more politically to the right than I am. And in my younger years, when I was less mature, we butted heads over that stuff a little bit, but we've talked it out. You have to have that initial talk out. And then it sort of clears the tension to now where we joke about it with each other. Like, we're in the best possible place about it. Like, they know I'm to the left of them. I know they're to the right of me. No one's trying to change anybody. And we can just sort of enjoy that. And they can poke fun at me. I can poke fun at them. We watched like presidential debates together. And it's like, it doesn't have to be your whole identifying trait of the relationship. In fact, it should not be at all. So it's a very easy to do if you care enough to do it, and you put the relationship first and know that it's not life or death for either than you, and this doesn't need to define you.
Jonah, we've reached the final part of our conversation, the Jewish Crossroads questionnaire. 5 quick and fun questions. Are you ready?
Ready. Born ready.
What's your earliest Jewish memory?
Oh, that's a hard one. My earliest Jewish memory is I have a memory from preschool. I would have been like 3 or 4 years old. and we were learning the words Abba, Ima, Ach, and Achot in class, and they had a little action figure or like a little rubber figure for each, and they hid them around the room. And I remember I found the Ach, and that's like my first Jewish memory.
If you could meet any Jewish figure from history, it could be ancient or modern, who would it be and why?
There's such a wonderful treasure trove of people to choose from. I'll go with Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. He's one of, if not the greatest leaders in human history. And as somebody who has found himself in a leadership role one or two times, I know I would have a lot to learn from him. And, he got to speak directly to the creator, so I'm sure he's have a lot of interesting stories to tell.
What is your favorite or most meaningful Jewish tradition?
I'll go with one of my most meaningful. Again, there's so many, but one that I really love is blessing my kids on a Friday night at Shabbat. I grew up, my parents did not bless me on Shabbat, and we would always have Shabbat dinner with our second cousins who lived in LA. They're my only cousins who lived in town. And those parents did bless their kids. So every Shabbat, I would just be like watching them get blessed, like looking at my mom and dad, being like, what the hell? And I was like, well, when I have kids, I'm blessing them. So now I bless my kids every Friday, and it certainly means more to me than it does to them. But I think when they grow up, they'll come to appreciate it.
But I will tell you a secret. I had the privilege last season of interviewing your mother, Julie Platt, and she picked Shabbat dinners as her favorite tradition. So it's still, mother and son, Abba and son.
Shabbat's the greatest. Shabbat's the greatest.
If you could jump 100 years into the future, in one sentence, what would you hope to see for the Jewish people?
I would hope to just see a mentality flip and everything that comes from that, from flipping from this temporary, we have to hide, we need to downplay, we're going to have to leave soon mindset, to celebrating Jewish excellence, Jewish dignity, Jewish self-respect, that we are just, bold and proud and rock solid in that.
What's one Jewish word, it can be Hebrew, English, Yiddish, whatever, that feels particularly meaningful to you right now?
Okay, this pops into my head. I'll say emet. Truth.
Emet.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute joy to have you with me on this episode. And that's the truth. That's the emet. Jonah Platt, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for this episode of Jewish Crossroads. We'd love to hear from you. Write to us at jewishcrossroadspod@gmail.com. Hit follow on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And if you enjoyed the conversation, please rate us. It helps us reach new listeners. Thank you to Samuel Hyde, Noah Slepkov, and Tamar Bar for recording, editing, and assisting in producing this episode. We'll meet again, same place, same journey, with a new voice. See you soon.